My name is Alina Hartman, and I am 32 years old, living in a small town called Pinewood Grove. I have always been a fighter. My life has not been easy, and my childhood was like walking through a minefield. My father was a man who wore many different faces. To the world, he was a respected deacon at our church, an apparent pillar of the community. But behind the closed doors of our home, he was verbally abusive, controlling, and a man who had no qualms about cheating on my mother while putting on a brave face for everyone else. My sister and I grew up under a dark cloud that seemed to never lift. My father's toxic behavior shaped a lot of who I am today, and I have spent years trying to rebuild myself after the damage he inflicted. I wish I could say that my relationship with my father improved as I grew older, but that was hardly the case. Last August, things took a darker turn when I disclosed something deeply personal to my family. I had gone through 2 silent miscarriages, and instead of receiving the sympathy and support I needed, I was met with a storm of political vitriol from my father. He crudely implied that my death from sepsis would have been acceptable in some twisted political sense, all while my stepmother sat there nodding along with his horrible words. In that moment, I knew enough was enough. I kicked them out of my house. The argument that ensued was charged with rage and bitterness, and it escalated into chaos. I witnessed them trash my guest room, hurling hurtful insults that felt like knives stabbing at my heart. When I tried to quicken their exit by grabbing their suitcase, my father lashed out at me, missing my intended target and landing a blow meant for my pride instead. My stepmother followed me like a shadow, screaming that I was the ungrateful daughter. It stung, and I vowed never to let them close to me or my toddler daughter again. I told them both to cut off any contact, knowing all too well that they were not safe or decent people, but backing off was not part of their plan. Instead, my father reached out to my mother and sister, attempting to manipulate them into getting to me. When that did not work, he sent me a series of nasty messages. Thankfully, neither my mother nor my sister responded because they were well aware of his toxic nature. They weren't fooling around. But things took an even darker twist when I discovered that my father and stepmother had approached my abusive ex-husband to gain access to my daughter. It was as if life was mocking me. The one person I had fought so hard to escape from had re-entered my world through a backdoor created by my own family. I felt trapped in a nightmare that I could not wake up from. I had asked them repeatedly to leave me and my daughter alone, but my pleas only seemed to fuel their relentless pursuit. Finally, after months of torment, I decided that I had to take a stand. I disclosed the attempts they had made against my ex during our divorce, hoping to close that door to their manipulative schemes, and for a brief moment, it seemed to work. He cut them off, but the desperate desire by my father and stepmother for access to me and my daughter didn't stop. Just 2 weeks ago, I noticed they reached out to him via Facebook, and I felt the weight of despair pressing down on me. You would think that things could not get worse, but my father had also been relentlessly cruel to my sister for over a decade. His constant harassment manifested in emotionally abusive ways that crippled her spirit. Not even a postpartum period for her was deemed safe. He found her in realtor pictures and took it as an opportunity to shame her. It was against a backdrop of a lifetime filled with his relentless critiques about her weight that I realized that nothing was going to stop him, not unless I took action that would rattle his very foundation. But my revenge was not born of mere impulse. I spent months channeling my pain into planning a calculated response. My father and stepmother owned a cannabis grow facility that was situated in another state. They frequently flew back and forth, their suitcases stuffed with cannabis products. For them, breaking the law while preaching about a moral high ground was an unfortunate hypocrisy. With that knowledge, I spent countless sleepless nights weighing the potential fallout and consequences of what I was about to do. Finally, after much deliberation, I decided it was time to act. I submitted a complaint with the Cannabis Regulatory Agency. I knew that my father had a securities license, which made his entanglement in cannabis business ventures not only hypocritical, but also illegal. My stepmother's foolish decision to fly with cannabis in her luggage was the final straw that I needed. I felt a mix of anxiety and relief as I pressed send on that complaint. This action was not just revenge. It was essential for protecting my daughter and finally creating some distance between my family's perpetrator and me. I hoped that they would become so entangled in their mess that they would cease their attempts to infiltrate my life. It was exhausting, and honestly, I was weary of fighting. As the days turned into weeks, the tension built. I waited in anticipation but also fear. What if it backfired? What if it only made things worse? Would my family lash out even more viciously? But despite the chaos, I felt a flicker of hope. The feeling of empowerment surged through me. Then, without warning, the consequences of my actions crashed down, just as I had hoped. The Cannabis Regulatory Agency reached out, and my father's world began to crumble. I stood by, witnessing him scramble to cover his tracks. He was thrust into an abyss of legal issues that drained resources and time, pulling him away from pestering my family. It felt strange to witness. A part of me knew this was cruel, but another part was relieved. In my heart, a burden lifted. I had fought for my daughter and finally found a way to take my power back, albeit through a method born of desperation. As life slowed down again, I found some peace. With my father distracted by the ramifications of his own making, I could finally breathe without the fear of unsolicited visits or vile messages. But the story did not end there. Just when I thought that my family might scatter into nothingness, an unexpected twist shook my new normal. My grandmother, the woman whom my father had abused financially, found out what he had been up to. In an act of pure rebellion, she denounced him and vowed to cut him out of her will. She refused to be part of his toxic legacy anymore. I had not just gained peace for my daughter and me. Somehow, the strength of our bond shifted the course of our lineage. We stood together, defiant against the emotional chains that had held us down for far too long. I had made my stand for my daughter, but along the way, I had also reclaimed my family's legacy from the ashes and transformed it into something worth fighting for. So yes, my revenge reaped more than I ever thought possible. It not only taught me to stand up for myself, but also empowered others to break free from the toxic cycle.